Whoever is
Yep. Just
starting us up,
give it about
ready.
5 seconds and we're live, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Egolf. I am the Speaker of the House in the New Mexico Legislature. Welcome to another edition of Live from Home. This is our series of virtual town hall meetings that we've had almost every Wednesday since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And they've been some great conversations about virus modeling, return to school, things that are presenting particularly difficult challenges to to New Mexicans all over the state. We focus on some tribal areas and the particular problems there. We've had a number of conversations about economic development and recovery, and that is again the topic for today. We are obviously seeing very, very difficult consequences to businesses throughout New Mexico, from the very smallest to the very largest, seeing effects from the pandemic, whether it be closures for in-restaurant dining. There's a big, obviously, economic impact there. Restrictions on travel, people staying home more. That combined with a national recession and the changing price of oil and gas and the effect that has on the state budget, as well as on the economy in Southeast New Mexico, there's a lot of challenges. And the employees of these businesses face a lot of uncertainty, especially with Washington thus far being unable to enact a follow-on to the CARES Act. But we are we'll do well to remember that while we have a lot of challenges in New Mexico, while our economy is going to need a lot of help to build back better than we were before, we have an incredible pool of talent in New Mexico with phenomenal ideas for how to make New Mexico competitive regionally, nationally, and globally, how we can put New Mexico back to work, and what we can do to assist small businesses and employers rehire people, expand, grow, and do even better after the pandemic than hopefully they were doing before it started. We've got a great panel today. We have Secretary Alicia Keyes from our New Mexico Department of Economic Development. I think this is your third appearance on this.
I'm a regular guest with you.
A regular guest. I mean, you know, Secretary, you're helping to like fuel this fantasy I have that I'm becoming a talk show host, because I can, you know, call you a repeat guest on the program. So thank you for that. We have Dale Dekker. He is the CEO of Dekker, Parish, Sabbatini, one of the Southwest's leading architecture and design firms. From the New Mexico Association of Commerce and Industry, the CEO, Rob Black, is with us. We have Debbi Moore, President and CEO of the Las Cruces Chamber of Commerce. So we're going to hear from all of them. First, we'll like to hear from Secretary Keyes. I think she has a slide presentation, and I'll just say that she has really hit the ground running at the Department of Economic Development. I feel like it was about 5 seconds after you became secretary, we had Virgin Galactic moving hundreds of employees to New Mexico. Great work in aerospace and film and TV, Netflix, NBC, Universal. The hits just keep on coming. And we're really fortunate to have your leadership and the leadership of the governor at this time. So, Madam Secretary, please take it away.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we did just close a really great LEDA deal this past week with Rose's Paper, which is a local company in the South Valley, and they make toilet paper. So we're helping them to expand and buy some new equipment. So Daniel, if you want to go ahead onto my second slide, we'll start there. And what we wanted to do was really just give you, hold on one second. We wanted to give you a snapshot of where we are. So the economic crisis resulting from COVID-19 caused a loss of jobs greater and far more immediate than the job losses during the Great Recession. The first downward pointing arrow you'll see shows the employment before the recession began at 850,000. The gray box shows the length of the recession, which was from December 2017 to June of 2009. I'm sorry, from 2007 to 2009. The second downward pointing arrow shows the date at which we finally hit pre-recession employment numbers in November of 2018. So really, it took more than a decade for us to recover. From our high point in employment in February of 2020 recently of 867,000, job numbers fell dramatically to the May 2020 level of 768,000. So that's really a loss of almost 10% of our jobs. So from May to June, we have seen an uptick of about 3% in employment, but we still have a lot of work we can do. And really what we want to stress is we can't take another decade to come back from this recession. So if you go on to the next slide, this table is going to show you the bankruptcies that are the business bankruptcies that are being filed and we found in court documents. So we haven't seen a wave of bankruptcy filings despite the economic crisis, and hopefully the combination of the federal and the state financing programs for businesses will prevent a surge in bankruptcies. However, you can see the list is growing long enough that it barely fits on the slide. And that has been a very recent happening, I guess, in the last week. So consumer spending is our next slide. And I'm just going to kind of cruise through these so we have enough time to chat at the end. This is a graph from JP Morgan that we put together, and it's on Chase consumer spending. So card spending. The one on the left, the graph on the left shows overall card spending. And you can see spending levels nationwide dropped by about 40% in early weeks of the crisis, but then gradually rose through mid-June before stagnating and fluctuating between -9% to -14%. So this stagnation falls in line with the national increase in daily COVID-19 cases. So spending is currently around 11% lower than it was a year ago. So the graph on the right shows in-person spending with the card versus remote spending, like, online through Amazon. While both types took an initial downturn, spending with the card not present eventually grew beyond levels from the same time a year ago. So in-person spending remains depressed by about 20%, likely due in large part to consumer health and wellness concerns. So the more what we're seeing is the more that companies and businesses adhere to COVID safe practices, the more consumers feel safe going to businesses and spending money. Let's go on to our next slide. So these are some of the initiatives that the Economic Development Department took right as COVID was happening in March. So we put together a no interest LEDA loan, and we've done roughly $1.7 million in no interest LEDA loans to companies around the state. We also put together an emergency loan guarantee program, and this is our department is providing collateral to businesses for loans, and we've done roughly 2.1 million. And we've currently just ended that program because the NMFA is now starting to do their program, which was approved in the emergency session by the legislature for 400 million in loans. We also noticed that quite a few people sitting at home wanted to support local businesses. So our outdoor recreation department, they started a Buy for Tomorrow Today website, so you could go on and buy gift certificates or merchandise that would be sent to you. And we actually found that that was a super successful program, and a lot of businesses used it. Okay, Daniel, let's go on to the next slide. In addition, the SIC put together the recovery fund for 100 million. And this is for businesses with more than 40 employees. And NMFA also put an essential working capitals program together, and that's emergency loans at a 1% interest rate to healthcare and critical service providers. As I mentioned before, just right below the NMFA Small Business Recovery Loan, and that was financed to the tune of $400 million through the legislation just recently. And also, I'm noticing at the bottom of the slide that that's where you would go to apply for the loan. Okay, let's go on to our next slide. In terms of what the federal government was able to get out the door in New Mexico for the SBA, as of July 31st, PPP was able to get out. There were still 128 billion. It's now closed, as you know, the August 8th date has passed. In terms of PPP loans, roughly 22,533 companies, totaling $2.26 billion with the average loan amount of 100,000. And through EIDL, the loans went out to 12,421 businesses. That was totaling 685 million with an average loan size of roughly 55,000. So let's go on to the next slide. So very briefly, I wanted to highlight some of the specifics about where those PPP loans went. The large table shows the percent of total awards by industry in two categories. So loans under or over 150,000. The SBA broke the data down this way. So this is kind of, it was impossible to combine. So we're showing both. We're also showing the percentage of total award value by loan amount. So as you can see, the loans reached as high as 5 to 10 million. You can also see that for the two size categories, 39 to 44%, those dollars went to communities outside of Albuquerque and Santa Fe and Las Cruces, which is really wonderful. And state agencies, local organizations, we all made a huge push to make to just market this program and to help businesses through the process. And SBA did a great job. So did the so did Russell Wyrick through his sister organization. If we want to go ahead and go on to the next slide. So this is something that the Economic Development Department is doing, is county economic summaries. And it's just in a better, it's not only for legislators, but for community leaders to better understand the impacts of COVID-19. So our department is now producing county economic and revenue reports, which provide gross receipts and other data not readily available at the county level. So there is a link on our website, and you can see it down below, gonm.biz. And the next set of quarterly reports will be released near the end of August and should give everyone a good picture of what's going on in your county as we prepare for the next revenue forecast in the next legislative session. So we also feel free to call us anytime if you want to go through those summaries. We have some fantastic economists in economic development right now, and our deputy John Clark is more than happy to walk people through their county. So really in closing, if we move on to the next slide, diversification. This is absolutely what we need. About 1/5 of our workforce is public sector. 38% of the state GDP comes from two industries: government, energy, and mining. Retail, oil, and gas account for well over half of the general fund revenues. So it's so important that we are building our base industries, our economic base industries, like advanced manufacturing, like value-added food, like aviation and aerospace. So the programs that we use the most, the programs that are most attractive to get companies here, to help expand companies that are already here, are JTIP and LEDA. And so please, please, please talk to your legislators. The speaker is very supportive of us, but any help we could get in keeping JTIP and LEDA funded like they are would be fantastic. So the last slide is really, where do we go from now? Prior to COVID-19, the state's GDP growth was 4th nationally and wages were increasing. We had an incredible amount of momentum. And I still feel like that we still haven't. We were talking earlier before the podcast started that the silver lining to this is that people do want to move outside of the big cities to New Mexico. Specifically, we're seeing a lot of companies from the San Francisco area, New York, California, where it's a little bit more packed, want to get into New Mexico, where the quality of life is great, and also we have a little bit more space. So this is an opportunity, and I'm always glass half full type of person. And I don't want to be Pollyanna about it, but we do have quite a few deals that we'll be announcing in the next few weeks that are that will affect the whole state. So I do feel like we have an opportunity here. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for letting me present these slides.
Well, thank you very much. And one of the things that the governor campaigned on, and we were all on the campaign trail together, was talking about shifting a lot of the mindset that for too long has had New Mexicans thinking that we are living in a poor state, that we can't have great achievements, that we can't do great things, and really reinforcing that there may be setbacks like we're facing right now, but there isn't anything we lack when it comes to the tools and opportunities for a great future for our state. So
absolutely,
it's great to hear some optimism. I'd now like to introduce Debbi Moore from the Las Cruces Chamber of Commerce. Again, she's the president and CEO, and we'd love to hear how things are looking down south and what you're up to. What challenges are you facing? What opportunities do you see? And what would you like folks around the state to know about the future of economic development in Las Cruces? Debbi, I think you're muted.
There we go.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. And Las Cruces, we are still here. And also as president of the State Chamber Association, I can tell you that what we face in Las Cruces is not that unique from what's going on across the state. It's just a little warmer down here occasionally. Today, I think it's 104. With that said, we live in a very unique community. I think I say it's a place where you can go and to pick pecans or pick grapes one day, and then the next day you could have the opportunity of being a rocket scientist or even an astronaut. So we live in a very unique area. I think, Mr. Speaker, if we would ask several of the business people here today, of course, their answer would be they need more capital, more dollars. The struggle has been real. I'm reminded every day of businesses that have given their heart out to give back to the community in the midst of when they're barely keeping their doors open. So the buy local message is strong. The creativity of business is strong and how they have maneuvered through this. As Secretary Keyes talked about innovation and the buy local today for tomorrow, I think that has really been residents here. We are a resilient community, and I think that shows to me every day what happens. Our small restaurants, we have lost a few that aren't going to be able to open again. We're also very aware that many of them are trying their hardest so we can get them the tools that they need, i.e. the dollars they need, either grants or loans, but also the knowledge, the education seminars. And I think it's all a community together. We have a strong Las Cruces Safe program that is a spinoff of the Keep Safe New Mexico. I am certainly encouraging all of our businesses in the area to be New Mexico Safe certified, the Chamber certified. We have our certificate. I think the consumer and the customer and the business owner all want to feel safe. So the more communities such as Las Cruces it can bond together and say we are safe as a community, and that is a key theme message that we as the chamber have really put out among our many seminars and things like that. We saw on the chart that Secretary Keyes had where the dollars are going on the online spending. And so one of the challenges, Mr. Speaker, I think we all have as we go into the holiday shopping season is how do we keep those dollars locally and utilizing the tax-free holiday that you and that the House and the governor signed a couple of years ago, that Saturday after Small Business Saturday. But how do we start that early and helping some of our small retailers really make that? Is it helping them get online? So not only am I looking at what's happening now, the challenge we have currently, but what are we going to look like in 6 months, 12 months, and 36 months? And what is that new norm? Helping the business community define, particularly small business, how do they figure out their new norm, or what is that going to look like? I can't give them an answer, but I can tell them I'm on the journey with them. And that's what it's all about. We're all in this together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. And I'll just put in a plug for the small business recovery loans that are happening at the Finance Authority. It's nmfinance.org.
Right.
And they, as the secretary said, these are very, very low interest. They require no collateral, no personal guarantee from the business owner, which is an important point that we wanted to emphasize. And they are at that low interest rate. The first 3 years are interest only payments. Also, the average cost for a small business to create a website, get an online store up and running is about between $2,500 and $5,000. So these small retail businesses, could get access to that amount of money very easily through the Finance Authority, and the repayment terms are very, very favorable. So that's one option to consider. We can't do a forgivable loan like the feds did because of our anti-donation clause. We try to get as close as possible, but I just thought I'd mention that as a possible source of some help for those retail businesses to get up and running online. Thank you very much for your comments. Next, we have Rob Black, President CEO of the New Mexico Association of Commerce and Industry. Rob's been in the job, I think, about 2 years, and he is coming to us from San Francisco, an area where there was a tremendous growth in economic diversification. And Rob's bringing his experience working there here to New Mexico, and has really, I think, done a fantastic job representing ACI and New Mexico business, and has really developed ACI into a great partner with the legislature. And I'm always happy to see him and hear what you have to say. So Rob, please share some thoughts with us this afternoon.
Absolutely. And Mr. Speaker, thank you again for having me. I will remind the folks on the call, though, that I am born and raised in New Mexico, down in Lee County, in a Lobo as well. So it's been a great opportunity to come home and work in this role and work with the leaders of the state to really focus on that economic diversification and job growth. For those who don't know, ACI acts as the State Chamber of Commerce. We've been around for 61 years and represent businesses in every sector throughout the state. And I, back in, and Secretary Keyes alluded to this in her comments, but back in January, February, Mr. Speaker, when you came and spoke with us at our Business Day event, it was a very different world as far as the business environment for New Mexico. We were leading in whether gross state product or gross GDP for state and employment rates. We were seeing remarkable optimism in the state, and things have, we've taken a big hit. And I wanted to, talk a little just framing on that, because I think it reinforces the importance of all of us working together going forward. I've been looking at a website called tracktherecovery.org. It's done by a Harvard professor, economics professor, who's using big data to basically take real-time or near real-time credit card, debit card, consumer spending, and tie that down to the county level. And the data really reflects, what Secretary Keyes had mentioned. Nationally, on consumer spending, we're down about as a nation around anywhere from 8 to 12%. New Mexico as of from January 20 to August, is looking at about a 13.3% drop, according to that website. That puts us fourth most significant drop behind DC, California, and South Dakota. On overall small business revenue nationally, it's down about 18.8%. New Mexico's off 21.2%. The number of small businesses open between January and July 27th nationally that number dropped by 18.1%, which is the same in New Mexico. So we actually fit right in the middle, kind of center space of the kind of business closures. But if you look at my sector, is where you really see challenges for the state. And again, I think it's part because of how our economy is structured. Nationally, if you look at restaurants and hotels, it's a 29.4% drop in revenue. For New Mexico, it's 50.4%. And we have the largest percentage drop in that sector of any state, with DC and Montana following at 46%. In entertainment and recreation, nationally, it's a 51.3% drop. In New Mexico, it's a 63.4%. Only California and Missouri had larger drops. On apparel and merchandise, and this gets to the retail side, nationally, it's a 10.7% drop. New Mexico had the second largest revenue drop at 21.7%, behind California at 21.9%. I say that because I want to paint the picture that we all have a lot of work to do together to get New Mexico out of the state we're in. I think the numbers are very challenging, obviously, but I do believe, and ACI believes, that New Mexico can emerge from this stronger and more resilient from this public health crisis. Frankly, with the governor's leadership in New Mexico, New Mexicans have flattened the curve again. And I think hopefully that puts us in a good position to safely reopen our economy soon. As well, if we are able to continue to do the things that are necessary to keep the virus in check, I do think that New Mexico will be uniquely attractive place to start and grow a business and recruit businesses to come. But again, I think it really requires us all to understand where our current challenges are, and then how do we move forward together. And what it's going to take to help our current businesses recover and start hiring again. McKinsey and Company estimates that in the next couple of years, next few years, there's going to be $4.6 trillion in trade flow rebalancing that takes place. So looking at different sectors and where those supply lines exist. Those are going to be driven by two separate types of factors. One, an economic factor, which is going to look at things like available capital, labor force, product complexity, the things that you're building, and distance to market from the process of manufacturing to actually delivering to the end customer. And then the other factor is really non-economic factors. So those are going to look more like trade barriers, concern over national security. Those sort of pieces will really look at those sort of governmental interventions, again, based on national security, national competitiveness, and self-sufficiency. We think these non-economic factors, combined with our proximity to Mexico, taking advantage of Santa Teresa and the resources we have there, gives New Mexico a very unique opportunity to take advantage of these global shifts. The sectors where we think there'll be the most movement in the non-economic piece, looking at communications equipment, semiconductors, aerospace and defense inputs, electronics associated with critical infrastructure, and chemicals and biopharmaceuticals. In those spaces, given our research laboratories, given our, again, proximity to the labs, our strong transportation resources through interstates and railroad, we think we can be very competitive, especially given the strong work that Secretary Keyes and her department has done using, again, LEDA and JTIP to target those industries. We believe that over the next few months, it's going to be really important for New Mexico to make some really important policy choices. Those are going to be things like continuing to fund those incentive programs that we know work, but also what are other ways that we can really support our businesses' recovery, as well as retention, and then recruiting additional ones. What are those policy choices? What are the barriers to growth in New Mexico? What are the barriers to entry into New Mexico? Some of that may be access to capital. We may need to be creative about how we perhaps use investments in some of our permanent funds, how we do that. And we've done that, and I salute, and we were very pleased to work with Representative Eli and Matthews on the investment in small businesses in New Mexico through the special session. But we also need to look at, again, on, I think, workforce, simplifying our process for construction entitlement. How do we create the ability to do more spec buildings in key industries? And looking at our tax and incentive policies to make sure they work for the industries we want to retain, grow, and attract. And I'll end with ACI we started in June of this year, and many of the folks who are on this call have been active in this effort. Is we've contracted with a group called Economic Leadership back in June to help develop an economic action plan for New Mexico. And Economic Leadership was a group that helped create the Research Triangle Partnership in North Carolina, which was responsible for bringing over 65,000 jobs to that part of the state. We're working with Secretary Keyes and her office, Secretary McCamley, UNM, the Arrowhead Center at New Mexico State, business leaders across the state, as well as organized labor, with the idea that we'll be doing research throughout the fall to put together a final report that we hope we can all get behind, that will come out before the end of the year, really trying to identify those key areas legislatively and regulatory that can help New Mexico move forward and really diversify our economy and create more resilience and ensure that we are able to bring back New Mexicans to work. So again, I really appreciate the chance to be on the call today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's fascinating, the recovery.org. I was just looking at it while you were speaking about those statistics, and it's one of the things you see is the steep increase in consumer spending as soon as the stimulus money started to hit. And I think that's one of the reasons why the governor and I and a lot of legislators are very worried about losing that extra $600 in unemployment checks. 600 might not be the right number, because it makes it hard to get folks back to work. But for it to go to zero, a lot of those dollars were going straight out the door into small businesses and local spending. And it's going to be a real it's going to be a big hit to consumer demand if we don't see some additional stimulus return. And that's great news about the work that you're doing with the organization. Hearing New Mexico talked about as a potential home of a future Research Triangle type community is very exciting. So that's very good. So I'm going to put you down for 65,000 jobs. That'll be the headline. Rob Black promises 65,000 jobs. So appreciate that. Next. Thank you, Rob, for your comments.
Thank you, sir.
Next, and certainly last but certainly not least, Dale Dekker. As I said, Dekker Parish Sabbatini is one of the preeminent architecture and design firms in the Southwest, maybe beyond the Southwest, but I know of your work here, so I don't want to limit your scope to just the Southwest, if that's not correct. He is also has a well-deserved reputation as New Mexico's economic and business visionary, with lots of great ideas for what New Mexico can do to improve our economy. And I can't wait to hear what you have to share with us today, Dale. So with that, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. I'll just get this teed up. So I'm going to run this, and I really appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to talk. And these are my observations about what's going on and what I see happening in the world. And I like this quote: "The future and the next normal," which I added, "belongs to those who prepare for it." Ralph Waldo Emerson said that, and it's a whole new next normal moving forward. Doesn't seem to want to cooperate here. There we go. I'll use that. And but pre-COVID, these were the kind of mega trends that were starting to shape the world of the future: robotics, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, machine learning, 5G, the Internet of Things, smart sensors, smart cities, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles and trucks, and climate change adaptation, which is driving any number of new industries globally. And it's really Industry 4.0, I think, that New Mexico has this unique opportunity to attract global companies to our state who are looking to retool, reposition, and play in a new manufacturing boom for the United States. And we have many strengths and opportunities in New Mexico, and these are just but a few. We have a very low cost of living. I think that plays into why we see people maybe looking to locate to Albuquerque and possibly businesses. We have the #1 lowest property taxes in the United States as those states surrounding us. We also have a great infrastructure for workforce training, which is going to be so important in the next normal. And our community colleges spread throughout our state really gives us an opportunity to retool our workforce for Industry 4.0. And of course, we have as a foundation great national labs, which has world-class scientific talent. Air Force Research Lab recently got named as a research lab, not only for the Air Force, but also for the Space Force, which is another huge opportunity to collaborate with Spaceport America. Of course, our research universities. And then we have a really strong, growing ecosystem of innovative companies, and some of these companies obviously are already billion-dollar companies, but I think we've got the opportunity for any number of private New Mexico companies to be really rapid growth and contribute in the future. And then something that everybody always says, and it's true, you know, we got the greatest weather in the United States. We have 310 days of sunshine, and something that we don't have too many of, which is a good thing and very important in a world of risk, is we have very few natural disasters. We don't have hurricanes, we don't have tornadoes or typhoons, so we have very low risk for earthquakes and those kinds of disruptions that could really impact where Industry 4.0 is going to go in the future. But I like this, the future ain't what it used to be, and surely that's where we're at today. Is everybody on this call, in business, in government, is we're really trying to figure out what that next future is going to be. And with disruption comes both challenges and opportunities. And who would have thought 6 months ago these would have been the things we would be focused on: social distancing, work from home, the A stands for anywhere, and e-commerce. And what is happening that I see, and what there's so much chatter about, is something McKinsey calls the quickening. That e-commerce in just 3 months had 10 years of the projected growth pre-COVID. So we're going to start to see things globally moving at a very rapid pace, and it's going to impact the way we live, work, shop, and do those things in the future. And here's just some of the headlines that are out there. Nearly a third of Americans are considering moving to less densely populated areas in the wake of the pandemic. And of course, what does this mean for the cities? How do cities like New York City, where mass transit is a must just for cities to work, how do high-rise buildings work when you might only be able to have 2 people in an elevator going up a 100-story building? I mean, the line in the lobby will be a mile long just to get up to their office. So density is going to play a part, and we start to see where there is already migration occurring from the high density areas where COVID was concentrated to places like New Mexico. So work from home anywhere. Why not New Mexico? I think is something that we could greatly benefit from. And that's low hanging fruit that could play in with how we brand our state with New Mexico True and some of the other tools that we have through economic development. But here's where I think our real opportunity exists. The global supply chain was totally disrupted with the coronavirus. And this quote, I think everybody sees, we're starting to hear more and more of it. The coronavirus has exposed a dangerous risk to the national security and safety to United States citizens. And here's why. China was the global manufacturing center of the universe for our world. And the United States, and you can see where it was, but when those supply chains got disrupted, it had a huge impact on the United States. And of course, this all happened after we had in place new trade agreements with Mexico and Canada. We were raising tariffs to level the playing field with companies who were offshoring and then reshoring product back to the United States. We reduced the corporate income tax, and it really created what is called the reshoring initiative. And we've seen tremendous growth in the last 8 years. Over 750,000 jobs pre-COVID were added as a result of companies reshoring to the United States. And if you put the multiplier effect on that, for every manufacturing job, you create 2 to 3 secondary and spin-off jobs. You know, that grew our employment base just because of those manufacturing jobs by some 3 million jobs in our country. But here's the thing that we as New Mexicans should really be paying attention to, and I know Alicia is and her group, and we're all trying to figure this out, is that 91% of the companies affected by the supply chain disruption in China are US based. So there's the market right there. They're US companies that were disrupted, and it hurts their bottom line and it hurts their ROI to their investors. And COVID-19 is providing a new and forceful momentum for reshoring of manufacturing back to the United States from China. So reshoring long-term is really bringing manufacturing and product back to the United States, and particularly in those areas of critical infrastructure. And then there's nearshoring. And this, again, is a huge opportunity for New Mexico. Nearshoring is the practice of transferring a business operation to a nearby country in preference to a more distant one. And clearly, Mexico is a lot closer than China is. And here's a headline: the pick for the next manufacturing superpower, Mexico. And this raises the question, should New Mexico develop kind of a binational economic development plan for the next normal with Mexico, and more specifically, the state of Chihuahua? I know Phoenix has done that with the state of Sonora around automotive. Maybe we need, and maybe it's already in process, to look at that. And that 81 billion is the amount of trade that goes through Santa Teresa and El Paso on an annual basis. So we've already got the infrastructure in place to move product north and south and south and north. And it's going to be in these areas where I think we're going to start to see the opportunities around critical infrastructure, pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, aerospace, microelectronics. There was just a big announcement about a Taiwan PMSC that is building a $9 billion plant factory in Phoenix to be closer to their customers, advanced manufacturing, critical manufacturing, and defense industrial base. So if you combine the nearshoring and the reshoring, New Mexico seems to be very well placed. And here's some of those things that only New Mexico has. And we have the lowest cost of renewable energy in the United States. And it's a result of when our sun shines and when our wind blows. And that's going to be a very important part in attracting business and companies looking to locate to New Mexico, because there's this group. Corporations now have determined they have a greater purpose than just the bottom line to their shareholders. It's about people, profit, and planet. And so there's the RE100, which is 223 global companies, have publicly committed to a goal of 100% renewables. So that's, again, a marketing list that we can go after. And we call this green shoring. This is something that New Mexico could take on and brand and go after these Fortune 500 companies, not to maybe get huge factories, but to get the Industry 4.0 companies that pay great wages, hire people, build a supply chain, and raise the per capita incomes for everybody in our country. So I think we are all waiting for that day when there is a vaccine, because that'll start to drive what the new next normal looks like. And here's the economic development clusters that we've identified, and we've identified these for a number of years. Film is not up here. Film is going to continue to grow and be an important part of what that economic development strategy is. But if you look at each one of these, they're going to be very important in the next normal when it comes to dealing with the critical infrastructure needs of our country, the safety, security of our citizens, and the health and welfare through pharmaceutical production. Sustainability and value-added agriculture, I think as part of the pivot to climate change, we're going to see a huge emphasis on locally grown and sourced food, because the carbon footprint of food coming from California to New Mexico is huge. And if we use our water resources right, we can grow our own food. But here's some things that are concerning. And it was interesting that Secretary Keyes showed that one chart that we were slow to recover out of the Great Recession. And we were identified as the number 51st best state for millennials. And I think we saw a huge out-migration of our millennials as a result that we weren't creating the jobs and the opportunities that were being created in some of the states surrounding us. And here's something we all need to work on. Forbes lists New Mexico as the 48th best place for business and careers. Which state is best for small business? New Mexico gets a D. I call some of these the hole in the donut slides. And we're going to have to look at that and figure out how can we elevate ourselves and make it easier for small business and business to thrive in our state. And here's something, again, that's just kind of interesting that we need to look at. We need to understand why this is. Why does New Mexico have nearly double the restrictions and rules and regulations that Arizona has? The cost of business, maybe some of them don't even need to be on the books, but they are. And we need to look at that and see if we can figure out restrictions that really don't add value to our citizens or our businesses, but have just historically maintained on the books. And then we found out what the big hole in the budget donut was, and that was oil and gas. And I think we all realize that oil and gas is going to be $1 billion hole in the budget. So I've been saying that really the only way for us as a state to grow is to grow our tax base through increased revenues, through private sector business growth. Oil and gas will always be a foundation of revenues. But with climate change and the impacts there, it's going to be reduced. The public sector clearly is always going to be a foundation. But to grow to meet our needs of our state's education system, higher ed, and all the other needs that we have, we've got to grow the private sector to help fill that gap. So here's just some points that I think we need to be looking at. And again, these are what I think we would all be doing and sitting down in business if we didn't have the revenues coming in that we thought they did. We'd be looking at what's our strategic business plan for the 21st century. We have to diversify our economy. That's already been said. And I think public-private partnerships are going to be a big part of that. We need to create a more business-friendly environment. And we need to make some real strategic infrastructure investments based on that 21st century plan. Broadband throughout the state, 5G is going to be the driver of the future. That's one of those investments. And something I think that is a great advantage for New Mexico in the next normal is that we can move fast. New Mexico can move with speed. And that's part of what we have to do. So it's really in the next normal, it's up to us as private citizens and as leaders in our state and as elected officials to figure out how do we connect the dots in the next normal to really drive a better and new future that lifts and creates a tide that lifts all boats for all New Mexicans and helps us grow our economy. So it's, at the end of the day, it is about celebrating what makes New Mexico true. It's a unique place in the United States, but also the world. And I think it's, we're on the edge of a huge opportunity for our state now and in the future. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the chance to share some of those ideas, and we'll go from there.
That's great. Thank you. Well, we I love your presentations, and it's really helpful to get us to think outside the box. And our viewership spiked during your presentation, so you were setting Facebook on fire, Mr. Dekker. So we have several questions. We have a little less than 10 minutes, and I will ask this. This is a question from Tracy Bryan. If each of you could pick one thing that you think would be the most important thing that we can do to help New Mexico come back after COVID stronger than before, what would be your, if you could snap your fingers and pick one thing that could be done, what would that be? Dale, you spoke last, so
Okay.
I'll ask you first.
Well, I think it's a collective mindset that we're going to have to change in our state. And I mean, I think historically we've all seen that our budgets in our state has been very dependent upon oil and gas and government spending. And going forward, just in the next normal, oil and gas we see is very volatile. We can't control that. It can't be a dependable revenue source, but it can be a revenue source. And government, I mean, the pressure for government to deploy resources around our country is going to be huge. So for us, I believe it's a mindset around how do we grow the private sector in such a way that we keep New Mexico, because we want it to stay the place it is that we love, but at the same time, it's going to have to change in order to create the revenues, I believe, that are necessary, that all of us feel probably are necessary to create a world-class education system, both higher ed and public ed, and to fund the healthcare needs that we have in our state. Another hole in the donut slide I didn't show is that we have the highest percentage of baby boomers from all of the states surrounding New Mexico. So these are all things that, you know, we need to build a business plan around and diversify our portfolio and all work together to kind of create what that next normal is going to look like.
Great. Madam Secretary, I see that you unmuted yourself. Do you have a top one wish list item?
You know, Speaker, I think the thing that has really hit home with me is this pandemic has hit the most vulnerable people. They are our essential workers who are getting barely paid minimum wage. And I think that just as a society, we need to think about that. And we need to really kind of gut check ourselves as to how we want to continue as a community. So I would say really the thing that's going to change New Mexico is for us to be supportive and to put our money where our mouth is with regards to recruiting companies here that pay workers well, that give them benefits, that allow New Mexicans to not have to do what I call is the New Mexico hustle, which is 2 or 3 jobs. You know, we should be able to have a full-time job and make a wage that keeps money on our family's table.
Amen.
Amen.
Yes. Rob, did you have a thought in answer to that question?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is I'm glad Secretary Keyes left me this opportunity. I think we do have to continue to support the initiatives like JTIP and LEDA that have been shown to be successful. So, but that's again, it gets to that put your money where your mouth is. But I think in a broader sense, you had raised this issue, and it ties in with where Secretary Keyes is. If we don't do something at the federal level right now, the economic impact to New Mexico because of the loss of the unemployment benefits you mentioned, as well as PPP running out for most businesses, while I read some pretty stark numbers, they're going to get a lot worse. So I think all of us, again, are in this together. We need to be working with our federal delegations to ensure that we're bridging to that new future, to the next normal, with some support that backfills the UI, unemployment insurance that does provide additional support for our small businesses so that we can get to recovery. because if we don't have that bridge to the next normal, there's a lot of them that will be left behind.
Thank you. Debbie, did you have a thought about what would be your number one wish list item?
Actually, I have several on my number one. You know, as I listen to everyone talk, I agree with everyone. And I was texting Tracy, really one thing, because she's from Las Cruces. You know, Mr. Speaker, you and I have seen this for years. I think one thing that can help all of us, if we can figure out how to do the broadband statewide. I mean, that would help small business get online. It would help the health industry, and certainly now would be our education. I think that is so critical to what our next normal is going to look like, who we're going to be, and how can we access that. And Secretary's shaking her head, and I think that's part of being a full society, is that have that broadband fix. And Mr. Speaker, one of the things I've started talking to one of our groups down here in Las Cruces and Dania County is entrepreneur succession. So during this recession period, I think we have seen a lot of entrepreneurs, for whatever reason, whatever reason, they're not opening their doors anymore. I would like to see how we can, either through family ties or even through the SBDC, who so wonderfully educates our small business, is to start that entrepreneurship succession program in our communities. And, you know, I have a friend in Santa Fe, Mr. Speaker, has been telling me about some of the businesses that are closed there, and she's very disappointed. What if we had this pipeline of entrepreneurs that were trained and ready to go, and we could connect the dots in our community and keep those small businesses that are so vital up and running? And I think that's something I would like to see our new norm. I think it's unusual. I have never heard of anyone crazy enough to think about it except me. But I think we can sort of figure out a way between SBDC, SBA, to work particularly in our rural communities, is to keep those businesses, that entrepreneur succession role in. And I think that will help us in the next norm, and if we face anything similar to this. That's my one thing, or two things.
Good. And we're right at the end, so we also had a question from Catherine Crociata about the digital divide and the effects that's having as we're still dealing with remote learning for the schools in New Mexico. We have done a lot in the last year in the legislature to expand broadband. By the end of the year, every school building in New Mexico will have high-speed broadband to the schoolhouse, and then it's up to the private companies to get the last mile. I of course understand that often it's not the last mile, it might be the last 20 miles. But there's some really innovative telecom companies. Sacred Wind is one where they're doing a lot of good work in the Navajo Nation. There's a startup based at the Air Center in Roswell, New Mexico, that is working to develop blimps that can be put at 60,000 feet in the air and would be able to provide high-speed internet access everywhere in New Mexico. Secretary Keyes, I think you know a little bit about this. They said the price tag is like 80 million. Representative Eli actually mentioned this to me yesterday. We were talking about the Small Business Act, and he said that there's this idea. I don't remember the name of the company. I don't know if we should mention it because I don't know if it's real or not. But it's a fascinating concept that for what seems like a relatively affordable price, we could have internet from the sky all over New Mexico.
Yeah, we've been working with them for a while now, and helped them out when they had a wind cyclone hit their hangar in Roswell. But it is a possibility. They would be providing not only broadband, but methane monitoring from the stratosphere. And this is a game-changing technology. And New Mexicans sometimes say, "Ooh, let's wait until it's a little bit more tested." But the CEO of this company has already run two major companies. One is called LifeStraw, which is the #2 item on Amazon. And so this is a proven CEO who is in New Mexico that's wanting to really provide broadband for 100%, all of the rural areas. So yes, we are working with him, full disclosure, and hopefully we'll have something to announce soon.
Well, and I know LifeStraw. I have one, so that's good. I'm one of those people that the first week of the pandemic, that was part of my rush to get my prepper supplies. So that's exciting. Well, that's great. I want to thank all of you so much for taking the time to join us. Thank you for everyone that's out there watching from home. We always want to end with a reminder that the governor's public health and executive orders remain in effect. They are having, thank heavens, they're having the desired effect. Our transmission rate in New Mexico is headed below 0.7, and our target was 1.05. We're doing a great job, and just compare New Mexico to Arizona and Texas to see what the governor's leadership has been able to do in helping New Mexico respond to the health crisis, but also with, as you compare economically, the results are not any better in Arizona and Texas, where they said we're not going to have the shutdown. So we heard from several of our panelists that the best and fastest way to get to economic recovery is by controlling and containing COVID-19, and I'm going to knock on wood to say we're on our way to doing that. But we cannot grow complacent. We cannot forget that COVID-19 is in New Mexico. There is community spread in every county of New Mexico. And so as we see these positive changes in the numbers of hospitalizations and cases and transmission, we can't let up on the efforts to stay physically apart, to stay at home, work from home if you can. But for heaven's sake, if you go out, wear your mask all the time you're out in public. And getting that to be a new norm is starting to work in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. And hopefully in Las Cruces, we're seeing very high rates of people wearing masks, which is great. I'll confess, I was on a phone call yesterday and walked from my car to the grocery store and forgot to put my mask on. And I got through the door into the produce section of the grocery store and felt like about as ashamed as if I'd walked in there without wearing any clothes. I mean, everyone was just aghast. So I ran out, got the mask, and ran back in. So please, please, please wear your mask. It's how you keep your fellow New Mexicans and their families safe from this virus. So until next week, thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to visiting. God bless you all, and we'll see you next week. Take care.